Dr. Austin Nweze joins us now. He's an economist of the Pan-African University. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Well, some scenarios playing themselves up, which, of course, a whole lot of people consider unfortunate. And depending on the way people see it, some also think that at least something good seems to be happening. But in terms of, let's say, the kinds of results we're getting now, do you think that's the best we could have gotten given the current circumstance?
Not at all. And again, you can't take it away from what is happening globally, because we're not out yet from the global financial crisis until maybe sometime in 2018. And the whole world financial system is still, EU is still struggling on how to come about have a grasp of the financial system so that it can work. And whatever happens in international scene also impacts on the local scene. So what we have seen from the banking sector is not encouraging. And one would have expected that nobody has business losing his job. I was one of the branches of a bank at Enugu in December, and it was a shadow of the shadow of itself at the bank, and the traffic was low. And I asked one of the guys, I said, well, at least it's guaranteed his job. But these days we have seen that no job is guaranteed. And because you don't have job security, but you have employment security. And they're two different things. And, so if you think that you're there, probably we have seen all the people losing their jobs in the system. And it's supposed to be the whole idea of reform is that you make it more, not for people to really. Yes, in any reform going on, some people might lose their job. And it's not only the banks, And I was in a company recently, about a week ago, and they're also, they're resuming coming out from, Christmas holidays, and some people are losing their jobs. So it's a whole system. There's something going on in the system. It's not only in the banking sector. So, but with the kind of funds injected into banks, with the hope that things will, at least people will be guaranteed job in the interim, and it will help the expansion of these banks. And you find that some banks are not even, closing up some of their branches because one, if the branch is not viable, you have to close it down, and then the people lose their jobs.
Yeah, but we also saw that, the way it was going at the time, there were those industry watchers and experts who also complained that if they had continued the way they were, with bank stocks skyrocketing, and then you see that the manufacturing sector was nowhere near what was going on, banks were not performing the core functions that they were supposed to, they couldn't allow that to continue.
No, not even allowing that to continue. If some of the banks that were presumed to have had a financial problem were actually, the money is injected, they didn't need it. Yes, some of the banks didn't need that money. There's a window, yes, there's nothing wrong going to the discount window to borrow some funds. But again, that was what that thing is meant for. And you don't allow banks to go under. Fine. But again, you find that their job of, making sure that they mop up funds from the informal sector, from the outside the banking sector. Their job is to, through this branch expansion and all that, they should mop up these funds. So because when a population of over 167 million people, about 10% have any form of banking relationship, it's not good for us. So rather than shrinking the banks and all that, they should actually be encouraged to expand the bank. Branches.
But there has to be a proper framework.
Yes, there has to be a proper framework. And you find that when a reform is working kind of negative, having negative impact, you need to rethink. And I think that the CBN and the policymakers need to rethink their ways, because it's having a negative impact on the economy. There's a huge, a demographic issue happening in the society now. Now, a recent report showed that about over 3 million people supposed to join the workforce by 2011, this year. after graduating from school and doing their national service and all that. So where will they go to? And the size of our economy is not deep enough to accommodate this workforce. So we need to deepen. We need to find ways of deepening. Rather than shrinking the banks and people losing their jobs and all that, we should find ways. The policies are made in such a way that if it is not working, you go back and come up with something that will work for the benefit.
You just talked about people losing their jobs, and maybe perhaps we should also look at that, being someone who is also an expert in communication. How best can people communicate? Because some of the protests we've seen so far from most of those people, specifically those who went to Abuja to protest, were actually shocked that it came on a Friday, and before even getting the letters, they were denied access to so many other issues, like maybe their personal computers, and secondly, now they're talking about this pension fund administrators trying to mesh their gratuities with their pensions that have been kept. So how best can maybe a company communicate to people when you know that you just want to disengage them from your service?
Well, one thing is, the hardest thing to do is to let someone go.
Okay.
And if you're emotionally competent, you should. There are certain things that you should consider. If you're emotionally intelligent, there are things you don't handle, because I have seen that happen. You come up as if there's a military way. I don't know, because of the long military that people take we have experience in this country that people take such action. You have to consider 80% of a man's life of time on a daily basis is spent in a workplace, and suddenly you are letting this guy go. You throw your empathy, which is important, through the window. So, and you find that again that it is not right, the way people get sacked, and you find that it has its own ways of nobody can be. Those people are supposed to be good ambassadors for the bank, because what happens at first impression is good. When you're coming to an organization, they treat you well because they won, but when you're going out, they just throw you off the window, not knowing that the last impression is the most important. You can be nice, but that last moment people forget. They only remember what you did the last time. And the news, when somebody is hurt, it spreads the bad news. Bad news spreads faster than the good. And 17 other people will be told, and that it keeps on going.
Yeah, but would that happen if the proper procedure, perhaps entitlement and everything, was properly done before they were let go?
No, you see, there should be some kind of notice to let the person prepare both mentally, spiritually, and physically, and financially. Now, in the right process, those people are supposed to be trained on how to handle some of these things 6 months ahead, at least 6 months ahead, on maybe if the person is retiring or something, on how to manage transition.
Yeah, but given the nature of these mergers and acquisition, did they have the luxury of that time, 6 months?
Well, it depends on how long. These mergers and all that, they have been talking about it for long. And what they needed to do was just to be strategic, more strategic, not an ad hoc thing that, okay, we do this, I don't care how this person... You're dealing with human beings.
Would it have been better if maybe your entitlements were all maybe ready as you come and it's handed to you? Would that have been some kind of a soothing relief for those who got their letters on that day, which was Friday last week?
Now, but the thing is, yes, if it is... But again, no matter what happens, even if you give them all this and the shock alone, you need to prepare people. In the 90s, it happened in one of the 3 major banks in Port Harcourt. People were called for meeting and all that. They thought that they were going for another thing. They said, everybody pass through this door. And when you pass through the door, you're handed your sack letter, and you don't have opportunity. You're escorted out of the premises. That's barbaric. It's absolutely wrong.
But because Chimba was trying to look at this acquisition and measure now, for instance, when you do that all over the world, sometimes, you ask, we discussed it this morning, you're asked to take a pay cut, or if you really can't take the pay cut, you take the alternative, maybe you leave. Should that have been the case?
Of course, people should have an option to stay or to leave. Let me mention when STB and UBA merged, a similar thing happened. They said, okay, STB told the staff of UBA, we have an option. This is the way we're going to run. And the issue of culture. The two cultures also, always clash. And when you're restructuring a company, culture is always the hardest and the last thing that you touch. And then it will take time. Those that remain, those that felt that the culture of STB, was not suitable to their own, kind of thing, then they had the option. Over 600 of them left. But what they did, I was in a team that trained these people on managing how they can manage a transition to whatever they wanted to do. And also those that retired. The bank spent money, prepared these people for life after STB or life after UBA especially.
How important is that?
It is important, very, very important. Now, they need a new orientation. All their lives they have worked in the bank. And by the time you teach them, okay, look, emotionally how to handle themselves, that is no longer life as usual. Waking up right now, they have to fend for themselves. And again, how to manage whatever payout they get. Because it's very, very important. Now, I was also involved in this in Warren when Shell laid off about 1,000 people in sometime 5-6 years ago. They were given option, and some people that lost their jobs, one of them, he couldn't attend the program in Warren because the shock alone, he had stroke. He had used it thinking that all things were okay and all that. He had borrowed money from the cooperative, bought about 6 new cars, even one for going to church, one for going this. Financial discipline.
Okay. Well, granted.
So these people, okay, the shock alone made that man, to have stroke.
All right. Granted, I mean, the handling really is of great importance, but doesn't the environment, the political, economic environment, doesn't it matter the types of agreement, mergers and acquisition notwithstanding?
No, you see, whatever is happening in the economy will definitely, impact on this. Nigeria's economy is in the woods, and every business will definitely feel it. But the thing is that even when you're doing this, you should understand or bear in mind that you're dealing with somebody's life.
Okay, pardon me. I say that because at the time that the merger and acquisition you talked about,
yes,
the environment was a little different from what we have now. Isn't that the case?
Well, it's still politically is more volatile.
What about economically?
Economically, even then, was much better.
Okay, because the banks relax and do it.
Yes, because the banks were given the freedom to take risks. Yeah. And then where there is no risk, entrepreneurship cannot thrive. Because you need this. Now everybody, even with the banking sector, even with the money injected in the banking sector, there is no confidence even within the banks. It's like you're giving somebody money. I say, yeah, I know that you're a hard man, reaping where you did not sow. Whenever you need your money, this is your money. Okay? Now, the banks were giving money that some of them did not even need it.
It's interesting that you brought that up again, because it seems to be taking us back to the process. The first guest we had as well, was saying that the method through which the monies were obtained and injected into those banks, due process wasn't followed, and as such, this is what you get. Do you also see a correlation between, appropriation as an approval from the National Assembly for the funds, and also the problem that we have found ourselves in concerning the banking sector?
Of course, and there seemed to be some kind of a lacuna, at that period. The fiscal side, fiscal management, nobody, the finance minister then didn't have at a point I thought that he was under the CBN governor, and the way and manner, and maybe he was trying to, put himself together and all that. But you find that the man was just doing, and then you remember that the former president was ill, and so many things happened at that time. So somebody had to do something because nature abhors a vacuum. So that was why he even injected that kind of money. And whether he printed it or not, I'm not sure. But injected that kind of money without due process. And it was not right.
How does the process affect what we have right now? I mean, whether assuming, because I asked this first guest too to also assume that he had gone to the National Assembly and that money was appropriated, the funds approved for injection into the banks. Are you saying that we will still not have a crisis of confidence in this particular
No, you see,
sector?
because every investment, even if you have all the money in the world, but if there is no confidence, if a consumer, for instance, feels that the economy is not going the way they should, just like now. Some of my friends who used to use they have, what you call car sharing. A husband and wife, they use one car, come out, the wife is going, so they have to adjust. So you find that if they know that the economy is not going the way, I will not be spending the money. I will keep some. I'll be cautious in my spending.
So if you relate it to the bank,
Yes.
if you were to advise on how to cut overheads, what would you have told some of these banks?
Yeah, the CBN told them, which the governor later denied when the Labour approached him and said, look, you're sacking people. It left, a memo was sent out, purportedly sent out to reduce 30% of the staff and 30% pay cut. Yes. Which was later refuted by the CBN authorities that they didn't so. But that was when initially the bank started following that instruction. And the fear of the CBN is the beginning of wisdom for some of these banks, because you find that you don't know what you will do. When I keep saying risk taking, the banks can no longer take risks.
Yeah, but why?
And then when they cannot take risks, businesses cannot lend money to businesses.
Yeah, but the
except.
Why did it have to be so? Because if you were doing the right things, I mean, just like a chairman will tell you, do the right thing, you got nothing to be afraid of. If the banks were doing the right things, why would they be afraid of somebody coming down hard on them?
No, there are two things. Now, the CBN is supposed to supervise these banks, and I keep saying, if you're smarter, if the person you're supposed to supervise is smarter than you, whatever he says, you follow. So you have to improve yourself to be as smart, so that if he comes through this way, you know where he's coming from. Say, oh boy, I know this, and I know where I'm coming from, but you can't do that. But a situation where you lack the capacity, you're not as smart as the person you're supposed to supervise, it has a way of affecting you. And the CBN, now they are trying to do more supervision, to monitor. Because I keep saying that anything that is not monitored can't get it done. If you want something done, you have to monitor it. You have to supervise it. So supervisory role of the CBN is everywhere in the world. It's not only Nigeria, even in Wall Street. Okay, we see what is happening today in Wall Street. All because those guys, they are,
What about the branches now? When we talk about overheads, now it reminds us of branches. Sometimes you wake up and a branch has just popped up on your street, and you wonder how well they can manage all of that. Should they be thinking of having some kind of centralized branches instead of having branches in almost all the streets and corners? In some places in Lagos, you can find the same bank on the same street.
Now, the initial reform that the former CBN governor started was like, let's have some mega banks with a lot of branches, okay? And what these branches do, the reason for expansion is that to be able to encourage people, you don't have to walk long distance before you put your money in a bank. Because Nigerians, we have this culture of having cash all around us. You have under your pillow, under your mattress, bank is too far and all that. And in some cases, some businesses, some banks even have an arrangement where they go to the markets to carry, with bullion van, to carry all these monies, to make sure the monies are in the banks. Sometimes you find shops, money, and if there's any fire, both the money and everything is done. That was why, so look, if we cannot have so many banks, why don't we have branches? And they're supposed to be a bank to at least 1,000 people. customers or 1 million customers.
But how big? How big should a bank be? Because you've been to some other places in other countries. You just walk in. There's a small place and it's a bank, and it's not a small bank. It's a bank that you can know that there's a global bank, but it's not the entire building. They're not taking over the entire structure. So why can't they also be thinking of doing such?
They feel that if you're a bank, is supposed to act some certain ways, and
even the small one,
even the microfinance banks,
exactly.
The microfinance banks, some of them closed down, all because the CEO of those banks, the microfinance bank, feel that this is a bank, a conventional bank is a bank too. So if a bank MD is buying a private jet, I could also buy a private jet as a microfinance bank, living a lifestyle of a bank manager.
But doesn't that just bring to light, the reason why when somebody buys over another bank or acquires a bank, chances are that they might have to really, really downsize, especially considering all that we have said now.
Now, yes, because one, you cannot carry overhead that you cannot take. I mean, you cannot take overhead that you cannot carry. Because one is, those branches, are they viable? Because it's viability of a branch that will determine whether a bank is making money, or a branch is making money or not. But a branch should pay its overhead. If it's not doing so, then there should be either. But sometimes I wonder what they do with those big buildings and all that. And I know.
So isn't this a part of the reform? Because we are really bothered that people are losing their jobs, especially in this particular time. But is it possible to be able to explain it through this particular means?
No, let it be left to the banks to determine whether they're losing money. If they cannot carry their overhead, fine. The wise thing to do is to, collapse the thing. Maybe have another one that will be more central that can cover the other.
But emphasis is on follow proper procedure.
Follow proper procedures. The CBN is supposed to approve all the branches and all that, but there is also approval in waiting, where the branch could operate while the paperwork is being done rather than doing
one more at a time. But talk about access to credit in all of this, because before now, those who were getting access to credit, some of the reports said that they didn't even bother paying back. They just go through parties all around, and then you freeze it up, and people who actually need it don't get it. The SMEs need these now. What do we do about that? Now,
one thing again is that some of the banks don't even understand. They don't have the capacity to understand how the SMEs work. The kind of risk that SMEs take, small businesses take, they cannot take it. I have a friend that has, a good business that he needs some funds. And even his bankers came and had a chat with them. They couldn't understand his language.
In spite of his business plan?
In spite of all that, you need capacity. You need capacity in all of this. So and again, banks, the kind of risk that banks are set up to take, they don't understand. And if we keep on channeling funds for small business, through the conventional banks, this economy cannot grow. We need venture capital firms that understand their entrepreneurs. They understand the way and the mindset of an entrepreneur, and they can come in. Private equity firms, hedge fund managers. These are the people that understand how entrepreneurs think, and these are the people that funds should be channeled to. And we have just a handful of them. So funds should be channeled through them to be able to reach where it's supposed to reach, because they can stay with these small businesses. How many banks, they give traders money to bring in goods. You find a bank official, rather than selling, liabilities by asking for deposit here and there, she's busy or he's busy trying to dispose of the electronics that on behalf of the client to be able to recoup their money. Okay. So it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge because the bank needs to, banks everywhere. Most banks, even in some other climes, you find that all these banks, channel money through the people that actually, but our own is bank will do this, bank will do that, not mining. Whether one, we have not gotten the critical mass of economic literacy that is required to understand some of the happenings around us, to be able to read our environment, to be able to know when to invest. So, and again, our policymakers, don't understand they need some kind of education to be able to understand the kind of policies that is good for our economy, our environment.